Hello, everybody. So today's topic is going to be about roles that we play in our lives. And this particular role that I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to talk about roles a few different times, different roles that we play, are roles that I play in my life. But um, if you're into spiritual things, you know that there are different spiritual roles that you can play: teacher, healer, things like that. And one of them is uh, sort of the archetypal mother, which I didn't know any of that stuff when I was studying for my graduate my graduate study. My graduate degrees are in English, and I focused specifically on American literature focused on women. So literature about women, literature written by women in the period of the 1860s up through the early 1900s. So I was specifically looking at archetypal theory, which is like, here's a very boring but brief literary lesson. Archetypes are psychological concepts based off of the work of Carl Jung, who was a student of Sigmund Freud. And it says that in our culture, in our culture, there are characters that no matter where you come from, no matter what culture you come from, no matter where you live on the planet, you understand this particular role. It might have a different name, but the role itself is universal, and it's in our collective unconscious that we store this. So if you were raised by a pack of wolves, you will still understand the concept of mother, even though you don't know the word mother, and you may not have known your human mother, right? You will understand what a mother is, because that's part of our collective unconscious. That's a very simplified way. And I was looking at it in literature and how that emerged in stories written about women or stories written by women. And I looked at two archetypes. I looked at the mother, and I looked at the temptress. So Mary, the figure of Mary, Virgin Mary, and the figure of Eve, right? So the temptress and the mother. And so when I was doing that study, what seems like 100 years ago now, I wasn't on a spiritual path like I am on this one, right? I was in a religious path, but I wasn't, kind of doing the work I'm doing now. And so I was reading about the mother, the goddess mother archetype, and I have to be really honest, like, I'm not in all that stuff. Like, I'm not into all that stuff. It's not that I don't believe it's real. I don't believe it's not true. I believe it can be true for people, but it's not my truth yet. I really honestly, I don't know enough about that stuff from a spiritual perspective. My approach is entirely literary to this point, but I was reading about it. And what I got from it, what I was thinking about when I was reading about it, is just the different roles that we play as women. And there are different roles that men play also. Obviously, as a woman, I know less about the roles men play. But from my own experience, I was thinking about what roles define me in my life. So, I'm a daughter, I'm a mother, I'm a sister, I'm a wife, I'm a friend, I'm a partner. I've played all these different roles in my life, and which are the roles that define me, right? Am I defined? I'm start when Dave's grandmother died. We all called her Grammy, even if she wasn't our Grammy. We all called her Grammy. And I sat down. I've written the obituaries for everybody in this family, my family, his family. When I sat down to write the obituary, I asked Pop, what is it you want to say? Like, what is it you want to say about Grammy? And he was, of course, very sad, but he goes, she was a great wife. Put that in there, that she was the best wife. And Grammy was very much defined in her role as wife. I am not defined in my role as wife. I have very unconventional views about marriage to begin with. Once I separated myself from the church, I kind of looked at the institution of marriage sort of historically and practically and theoretically, and I just have very different views about the institution of marriage. So I have a feeling we're going to get interrupted a lot tonight, because I have a bunch of hikers in the yard, and my family is never all that aware that I'm actually doing anything in my kitchen. So anyway, I think I was talking about that the roles that that we accept for ourselves, and the definitions that we go by. So I definitely don't go by the title wife. In many senses, I've always been a very hyphenated person. I mean, I even have a hyphenated name. And as I get older and I learn more about my own past and my own things, I'm very hyphenated. I don't ever belong to one world or another. Sort of that hyphenation in between. If I ever wrote a book, that would be the title of it. It'd be called Hyphenated, because pretty much my entire life I've been hyphenated. So, what roles do I sort of value in my life? And I'm drawn back to, as I was thinking about it and praying about it before I'm meditating, I was thinking about the conversation that I had with Mother Superior. Now, I had gone to the Anglican convent several times. Remember, I was going to be a nun, so I went there a lot for different retreats with my church and on my own with some friends of mine who were priests. And I went to the Anglican. Unfortunately, the Anglican convent no longer exists. It's now a Roman Catholic convent, and all the nuns became Roman Catholic because in the Episcopal Church, nun isn't really a role anymore. So my last visit there, which was the one where, I sat down to talk to Mother Superior about becoming a novitiate, which is, when you kind of go and do your trial run as a nun. We had a few long talks that weekend, and she just looked right at me and said, my job is to be honest here and to tell you what I feel and what I'm seeing. And I believe you are really not called to be a nun. You are called to be a mother. And I thought to myself, well, that's ridiculous. I don't even have a boyfriend. I've had 3 boyfriends in my life, and I'm friends with all of them, and I'm married to the one of them. I wasn't a girl that I was boy crazy. I always had crushes, but I didn't really go out with boys. And at the time, especially at that time, because I wanted to be a nun, I wasn't on that plane of thinking at all. And I'm thinking, well, don't you have to have a guy in your life to have babies? I mean, I did pay attention somewhat in biology class. So it seemed like unfathomable. Like I couldn't fathom it at all. Like this idea that I would be a mother. But I always did like children, and my ministry was youth ministry, and I've always been, I didn't have the greatest of childhood, so I wanted to be, I wanted to have an impact, a positive impact on to lives of children who were like me growing up. And I attribute a lot of that to the Girl Scouts, because I worked at a Girl Scout camp while I was in grad school, well, between college and grad school, and then in grad school. And I got to meet some really powerful women, really empowered women, friends that I still have today that I absolutely love and cherish and adore. Unfortunately, one of the greatest people I had known passed away. But I was surrounded by these really great women, and I thought, well, living in a community of just women, I would really be able to focus on the gifts that God gives us as women, and that I could work with troubled youth, and that would be, through God's divine love, I would do that kind of work. And when you told me that I would be a mother, that I should be a mother, I couldn't even wrap my head around that, because I wasn't in a relationship. And I wasn't planning on being in one. So, where I come from, both religiously, and in the place that I come from, where I grew up and stuff, and the expectations of the social class and sort of the socio-economic influences, and also the social influences, there were people who got married and then had babies, and there were people who got pregnant, then got married, then had babies, and there are people who got pregnant, didn't get married, and had babies. Obviously, that is probably the pattern everywhere. But my mom had my oldest brother when she was 16, and so I was sort of raised with this absolute fear of being in a sexual relationship, because I would end up like her, and she would tell me that, like, straight up. She would tell me that, like, don't be so boy crazy, you're gonna end up like me. And I ruined my whole life. And she didn't have the choices that girls have, or the girls that I had, that I grew up with, had when they were having babies in high school or whatever. So it was always impressed upon me, this fear of having sexual relationships men or women. Like like sex was like this horrible, rotten thing, and only it was dirty and bad and wrong. So I've certainly moved away from that idea because I think I think I mentioned in a previous video that I don't view sex necessarily as an emotional act, although it can be. It is definitely a biological act because at the end of the day, humans are still animals. We're still, highly, evolved. I think. I mean, I kind of think dolphins are more highly evolved than us. They don't cause wars and hurt each other for no reason. But for the most part, like we assign emotion and things like that to sex. And so I don't necessarily believe that, you have to be in love with somebody to have sex with them, but I think it is an expression of love if you are in love. So all that said, I couldn't just, because of my religious upbringing, I couldn't just have a baby. Like I couldn't go do in vitro or something. Although I absolutely respect people who do that. So I got married. I had kids I had trouble getting pregnant with David, and then I had David, and then 10 months later I had Julian, and Julian was born special needs. And I realized in my meditation today that I really was called to be Julian's mother. So he's working a little summer job. It's his first paying job. He's working for the parks department in one of the local towns, and he's working with 6 other disabled boys. And they have like a counselor that kind of meets with them and helps guide them, and and like it's physical work. Like they have to paint stuff and they have to like sweep things and do all this work, which is exhausting for Julian. But he's learning a lot about working in the real world and sort of the lessons that you can't learn from mom. You have to learn them in the world. And as I was picking him up today, I was thinking like, this really is like that Mother Superior was pretty smart, because this really is what I'm called to do. I'm called to be his mom. I don't always get it right. Didn't get it right necessarily at the restaurant. I know how to handle Julian when he's having a moment. I seem to be the only one after 19 years who does. But I know what to do, for him. I know how to calm him down. And every decision I have made since he's been born has been about protecting him and creating a space for him to survive and thrive. And to be honest, I've had to make really hard and tough decisions about things that I want, right? I've had to put things that I've wanted on a shelf. I've had to completely abandon things that I want because he comes first. So I was very fortunate when he was young because I was a teaching professor, and I could create my schedule around his therapies. He had 7 therapies a week. And so I could create my teaching schedule around when his therapies were going to be. And so I was very fortunate to be, a professor in higher ed, being able to do that, right? And so we went a step further. We went a step further and got him therapies that aren't covered by insurance: music therapy and equine therapy. And so, whenever we've moved or done anything, it's like always been, about making sure that he had a place and that he had support and that he had a good experience. And I know that people my age are all going through empty nest because most of their kids are a little bit older than mine, and so they're just graduating college, and mine are just David just started college, and Julian will be until he's 21. And I don't know that I'm going to have the same kind of empty nest syndrome that other people have, because Julian will always be with me. But it's made it hard. In the past I couldn't go away, for 10 days at a time. In the past I couldn't, well, I had to. I worked at MIT for a summer, and I had to be separated from the family. And I was very fortunate that my mother-in-law really kind of stepped in and helped, pretty much every day, because had she not, it wouldn't have been possible. But I had to work. Like I had to do that particular project. So I've been very fortunate that I've had help along the way. But it has meant, sacrificing some things that I wanted, or that I want, right? Like, would I love to take off and, do a through hike of the Appalachian Trail beginning to end? Absolutely. But I can't, because Julian, like, I could not possibly leave Julian for that long. And I mean, he's at the age now where I can do more things, and I can be gone longer and things like that. But he's very much he's very much a scheduled, and he really likes his schedule of things and how they operate. So he's gotten much better over time. But like if you say we're gonna have hot dogs at 7, I mean at 7 o'clock he is standing there with a bun and saying, "Where's my hot dog?" Like he, you can't tell him that things are gonna happen that aren't gonna happen. And I'm a very free spirit, so I've had to really modify how I behave because I really fly by the seat of my pants most of the time. And I'm comfortable with that. I actually kind of enjoy the the sporadic and spontaneous nature of life. But for him, like I have to stay on task and be very scheduled. And so he gets upset if I'm upset. And that's probably been one of the hardest things of my life is that I can't show any emotion in front of my family ever. Like I cannot be sad, I cannot be angry, I cannot actually vent or anything in front of my kids and be human because he doesn't deal with it well. So for many years, it all kind of just pent up and built up inside. And then on the trail, out in nature, I was able to let a lot of that go. And I still work at that, right? I still work at that. And we give up a lot of ourselves when we become a mother. I think that is. But the benefits, of course, outweigh what you give up, right? And I think back to that Mother Superior who was like 110 when I talked to her. So she must be passed on now. And I thought, how wise of her to know that that my calling was to be called to be a mother of a special needs kid. And to make sure that life for my other son wasn't, like that he didn't become, that it didn't affect him, like that he had special space too, because when you're little and they're 10 months apart, but when you're 2 and your brother's 2 and somebody comes every day to play with your brother, but they're not coming to play with you, like that does, like you have to protect your other children too, from, and make sure that they have good experiences and don't feel less than or excluded or whatever. So that's what I was thinking about today, and just thinking what a blessing it is that I get to be David and Jillian's mom, and um, of the all of the different things that I can be labeled, probably my best one, the best thing that I get to be called is mom. So that's my message for you today. I hope you're well. I wish you all the very best in light and love. Be well.